The last part of this chapter looks at different types of photosynthesis. When you look out the window, you see a lot of plants. Most of these plants are living in a moderate type of rainfall and light, and these are called C3 plants. They're called C3 plants because the first molecule that is made is a C3. So these plants are adapted to the light and rainfall condition of their environment, as are other plants. There are three types of photosynthesis that have evolved over time, and two of them are adaptations of the C3. So there's the C3 photosynthesis, C4 photosynthesis, and CAM photosynthesis. C3 photosynthesis predominates when light and rainfall are moderate. And it's called C3, as I mentioned, because the compound formed first after carbon dioxide is fixed has 3 carbons. Most plants and algae are C3 plants, so it is the most common type of photosynthesis. But as we'll see here in a minute, there are some problems with C3 photosynthesis. C3 photosynthesis is going to happen in the cell called the mesophyll cell, and the mesophyll cell is full of chloroplasts. So in the mesophyll cell, we find that the stomates, in the C3 plant, we find that the stomates are open during the day. Carbon dioxide comes in during the day. The light reaction is running very efficiently during the day because light is available to the plant. Excuse me. And the Calvin cycle is running. So most of the plants we see out there are C3 plants. There's a bit of a problem, though, with C3 plants because their stomates are open during the day. If the weather gets really hot, the plant runs into a problem because the stomates are open and water is lost through these stomates. So these plants very often will not do well in hot summers. When the weather is hot and dry, preventing water loss is critical. It would be good if they could close their stomate to limit water, but this also, excuse me, closing the stomates, which they can do, is going to prevent carbon dioxide from coming into the plant. It also causes another problem because it allows for the buildup of oxygen. That's a problem inside of the plant, something called photorespiration. And it's a problem because rubisco, that enzyme that we learned about in the first set of slides, is a stupid enzyme. This enzyme not only can bind carbon dioxide, it can bind oxygen. So when it binds oxygen, the rubisco can't bind carbon dioxide, so it gets all plugged up. So an adaptation has occurred over time in a plant that is called the C4 plant. C4 plants are going to live in hot, dry climates. And they are called C4 plants because this is the first compound, 4-carbon compound, is formed first after carbon dioxide fixation. So with the C3 plant, it's a 3-carbon molecule. With the C4 plant, it's a 4-carbon molecule. Okay, so why is this important? Well, first thing, the C4 plant has a different anatomy than a C3 plant. C3 plants are going to have their mesophyll cells arranged in parallel rows. Remember, both the Calvin cycle and the light reaction occur in the mesophyll cells. The C4 plant, on the other hand, has a layered arrangement around the leaf veins. The chloroplasts in the mesophyll cells fix carbon dioxide only, and there are cells called bundle sheath cells that are going to be protected from the buildup of oxygen. So the chloroplasts in the bundle sheath cells are going to carry out the Calvin cycle. So what happens with the C4 plants, they partition their pathways in space. In other words, the light reaction goes on in one cell, in the mesophyll cell, and the Calvin cycle reaction goes on in the bundle sheath cell. So in both of these plants, the C4 and the C3 plant, their stomates are open during the day and they close at night. Both of them will close their stomates when it gets hot and dry, but that's not a problem for the C4 plant. It is for the C3 plant because of that buildup of oxygen. That's called photorespiration. But the C4 plant gets around that because the oxygen stays away. The bundle sheath cells are shielded from the buildup of oxygen. So when we have a hot, dry climate, the conditions are going to favor C4 photosynthesis. So when we take a look at these two different arrangements, we can see the C3 plant here on the top, how different it is than the C4 plant. Okay? So the C3 plant has these mesophyll cells, and it also has bundle sheath cells, and the bundle sheath cells surround the vein. Both pathways, the light reaction and the Calvin cycle, are going to go on in the same cell in the C3 plant, in the mesophyll cell. In the C4 plant, we're going to see these reactions partitioned in space. So they're going to be going on in different cells. So here we see these mesophyll cells arranged in a much different pattern. And this pattern is called the Kranz, K-R-A-N-Z arrangement. Kranz means wreath in German. So if you were to look at a slide of a C3 plant versus a C4 plant, you would right away recognize that the C4 plant has a different arrangement, and it's going to partition the reaction in space. In other words, the Calvin cycle is going to go on in a different cell than the light reaction will go on. So the bundle sheath cells, right here, the bundle sheath cells, which are around the vein, the bundle sheath cells are going to carry out the Calvin cycle. The chloroplasts in the mesophyll cells do the light reaction. So here are the mesophyll cells, right here, arranged in a wreath arrangement. And again, we see the stoma. The stoma will be the opening. Both of these plants typically will have their stomates open during the day and closed at night, but they can close their stomates when it gets hot and dry. So the C4 plant is going to be favored when it gets hot and dry. So the C3 plants carry out both of their reactions in the mesophyll cell. This is good when it's not that hot in moderate conditions, but it is a problem when the stomate closes because oxygen builds up in the mesophyll cell, it binds to stupid rubisco, and that slows down photosynthesis. The plants are going to die if they can't photosynthesize. C4 can also close its stomates when it gets hot and dry, but it's not going to affect it so terribly. Photorespiration is prevented in C4 plants. And this is because that first molecule that is made is a C4 compound, and it is made in the mesophyll cell. The Calvin cycle occurs in a different cell, the bundle sheath cell. So the C4 compound is actually holding on to a carbon dioxide. It's going to hold on to that carbon dioxide, and then it will eventually be split from it and transported into the bundle sheath cell. This allows the stomates to stay closed, which conserves water while avoiding oxygen exposure to rubisco because oxygen is not building up in the cells. So I'm sure you know C4 plants pretty well. C4 plants you see in the summertime in your lawn. Crabgrass is a very good example of a C4 plant. The C3 plants, which is your Kentucky bluegrass growing in your lawn, doesn't do very well when it gets hot and dry. So come August, your grass looks terrible and up comes the crabgrass. You also are well aware of another C4 plant because we grow a lot of this in western Pennsylvania, and you'll see it in August growing quite tall and nice even when it's hot outside, and that is the C4 plant. The corn. Corn is a C4 plant and that is going to use two separate cells. So carbon dioxide gets fixed in the mesophyll to a 4-carbon molecule. That 4-carbon molecule happens to be called malate. Malate then can be split, and the carbon dioxide then can be transferred into the bundle sheath cell when it is necessary. So C4 plants are going to partition this reaction in space. In other words, two separate cells are going to be involved in photosynthesis. The other type of photosynthesis is seen in succulents and desert plants. In this case, this is called the CAM photosynthesis, and CAM stands for Crassulacean-acid metabolism. So the product of CAM photosynthesis, instead of a C3 or a C4 molecule, is called the CAM molecule, or Crassulacean-acid. In this case, the reaction is partitioned in time. So the light reaction and the Calvin cycle occur in the same cell. And again, it's a mesophyll cell. So it's like C3, the same cell is being used, except things are going to happen at different times. So during the night, CAM plants open their stomates, and it's nice and cool. So when it's cool, water is not going to be lost as easily as when it is hot. So the stomates are opened up during the night. In comes the carbon dioxide. The problem is that carbon dioxide is coming in, but the light reaction's not running. The light reaction is not making NADPH, nor is it making ATP, so photosynthesis cannot be completed. So in comes the carbon dioxide, and in comes the carbon dioxide, but what happens to it? Well, C3 molecules are going to fix that carbon dioxide, making a C4 molecule called Crassulacean-acid. These C4 molecules are going to be stored in vacuoles until the daytime. So at night, in comes the carbon dioxide, and it gets stored essentially as a C4 molecule. During the day, the stomates have to be closed, so carbon dioxide can't come in. But there is that C4 molecule for which the carbon dioxide can be split off, so that carbon dioxide that's been stored now can be used when NADPH and ATP are plentiful from the light reaction. So the Crassulacean-acid plant is going to partition this reaction in time. It's actually going to do the light reaction during the day, and it's going to bring in the carbon dioxide at night. So the secret word for this recording is pineapple. An example of a CAM plant is a pineapple. So at night, the pineapple opens up its stomates. It brings in carbon dioxide and forms a C4 molecule. That C4 molecule is stored in vacuoles. It's not in a separate cell like it is with the C4 plant, but instead this molecule is stored in a vacuole, and then during the day, that carbon dioxide is going to be split off of that C4 molecule, and it is going to be pumped into the Calvin cycle. So there are three different types of photosynthesis that can be used by plants. Most of the time, you'll find the plants are C3. Even in areas that are hot and dry, still most of the plants are going to be C3. In the desert, we can find CAM plants. We also find C4 plants, and we also find C3 plants in the desert as well. Okay. So C4 plants most likely evolved in and are adapted to areas of high light, high temperature, and limited rainfall. They're very sensitive to cold. So C4 plants are going to be our plants like our annuals that we have to go and buy every year at Home Depot and bring them home, like the petunias, the snapdragons, and we have to plant them in our garden every year because they're going to die when it gets too cold outside. C3 plants do better than C4 plants below 25 degrees Celsius. So some of the examples of C4 plants they're going to be perennial plants, and this includes crabgrass, corn, and sugarcane. So sugarcane is a C4 plant and is well adapted to higher temperatures. CAM plants are going to compete well with either C3 or C4 when the environment is extremely dry. You would not think so, but CAM plants actually are quite widespread, and CAM plants include cacti, bromeliads. Bromeliads are very pretty plants called silver, their nickname is silver vase, and pineapples. Also hens and chicks. Succulents are becoming very popular these days. Succulents are sold at stores. Home Depot sells them. They're very pretty, thick type plants that you can, as long as you water them and just a little bit and keep them around sunlight, they do quite well. Okay, so our secret word is pineapple.